This is Court Storming with your host, Perry Sook.
Hello, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Welcome to episode 4 of Court Storming. Obviously, a tough time for the St. John's Red Storm down in Vegas, managing just one win and are now just one win over 500, sitting at 4-3, coming back to start their rest of their out-of-conference schedule. Needless to say, not exactly how fans wanted this one to go, not exactly the thoughts and vibes we had coming into the season with the number 5 overall ranking, highest in program history. And let's get right into why that happened. Joining me now, a fantastic guest. We have the New York Post, Zach Braziller, a man who is down there in Vegas having hopefully a good time on the showroom floor, but not so much in the court. Zach, I want to get right into it. What was the general overall vibe? I mean, fans here are acting like the sky is falling. How was the Vegas experience for you, who was right there?
Yeah. I mean, look, the stuff on the court was kind of a roller coaster. There's no doubt. You start with Iowa State, a top 10 team, really good team. And the Gators, they won in the final minute, and it didn't happen. Then they respond and kind of probably played their best game of the year against Baylor. A Baylor team I expect to be in the tournament, a good team, kind of like St. John's, where that's got a bunch of new guys and is working it out. And St. John's dominated, beat them by 15. It really wasn't even that close. And it was really encouraging performance. And then you get to Auburn, which was kind of really determined the trip. The first game was a disappointing finish, but they played very well against a really good team. Second game, they outplayed a solid team and really played well. In the third game, even though they led by 9 at the half, didn't play well early. Too many turnovers. Second half was a collapse. They go from up 11 to losing by 11, and the defense was a problem. They really didn't shoot the ball well at all. Bryce Hopkins and Isaiah Sellers the day before were terrific, combined for 48 points. Couldn't really throw the ocean. The defense again against a really good guard. High Pettiford was a mess. So yeah, I mean, it was a bad. It ended up being a bad trip, which had a chance to be a good trip. You go 2-1 in that Auburn game, it feels a lot different. And yeah, I mean, this is a fan base that likes to jump off cliffs after any loss. So a 1-2 trip predictably elicit doom and gloom.
Yeah, doom and gloom, which is unfortunate, but I think it just speaks to the level of expectations that this team had coming into the season. This wasn't we're putting some good pieces together and let's go on a run. This is, hey, we had the number 1 transfer portal, class in the country and all that. And to me, it really was the second half of the Auburn game. That last 9 minutes, when you had Tahad Pettiford, a local kid, by the way. I covered him out at Hudson, but goes out and just could not be stopped, and there were no answers. You go from an 11-point lead and looking like a 2-1 team getting your first ranked win to all of a sudden coming home 1-2. For me, it all still comes down to the defense. And there's other things that need to happen. I think the rebounding obviously was a massive problem, as we'll get into as we go through these games. And you said it, the team is way better when Dylan Darling's on the floor. I think it's no pure coincidence that when he was off the floor with injury or hurting, that this team suffers. Even if he doesn't stuff the stat sheet, the team just flows better. But it all comes back to the defense. Rick actually had some very candid comments about the defense after the game. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what he had to say.
This is a very average defensive team. They are not locked in like last year. Last year, our guard, even Devon, our guards rebounded. And this is not a locked-in defensive team because they're new to each other, and they're going to get it or they're going to continue losing. So it's a matter of wanting to get it, wanting to be a great defensive team, and if they do, they'll get it. If not, they won't. They'll have a long season.
All of that said, though, there were some good things. There were some good things in Vegas. I was encouraged by Joe Sansanin coming on a little later. I thought Isaiah Sellers from 3 was finally the guy we thought we were getting, in St. John's when you looked at his percentages coming into the year. and that very much on display during that Cyclones game. Let's go ahead and talk about the first game, because to me, that is not a crushing defeat. That is a defeat where you battled back and you end up losing by one. What are your thoughts? What were your big takeaways from the opener?
But the area this team has to get better in defensive rebounding. They lost Iowa State because of defensive rebounding. And I agree with you. No, that was not a bad loss. Iowa State's a really good team. Look at what they did the next 2 days without their best player, who got hurt in the last minute of the St. John's game. Lipsy. I mean, they crushed Creighton, they crushed Syracuse. Like, Iowa State's really good. And St. John's could have won that game. But it was defensive rebounding. They gave up 11 second chance points in the last 8 minutes. You know, and that was really what lost them the game. Yeah, they had chances. Offensively, as I said, was driving into the lane was kind of, I didn't like that shot. And I do agree. They need more from the guards. They need more from everyone. There needs to be more of a focus from everyone to clean up defensive glass. Because right now, they're not good enough to give the other team extra possessions. They're doing it way too often. These are all teams that are like top 20 in the country in offensive efficiency. So I think that's one thing we need to take into account. It's not like they're losing to bad teams. It's not like your team's getting exposed by mediocre teams. It's getting exposed by some of the best offensive teams in the country. Auburn and Alabama have some of the best guards out here. Iowa State is a terrific team. Baylor is a very good offensive team, has their issues defensively. But that's one thing I think everyone has to take into account is the four high major teams are especially good offensively. But that kind of brings into account the defensive rebounds issues. You have to be better rebounding the basket. You cannot be giving these talented offensive teams second and third opportunities.
Well, and the boards have been an issue. I don't know how many times we've heard Coach say, I used to have guards that would rebound. I would have guards that would muscle guys out. And then you have Zuby, who's maybe boxing out 2 or 3 guys because the guard didn't necessarily box his guy out, and then he's not getting the board. And again, even in the Baylor game where they won, it was a problem. It just didn't come back to bite them. I did have one last question on the Baylor game. After the game, Coach was asked about, is really a Zuby 3, was that the play you had drawn up to end this one? And he kind of snipped at the reporter and said, yes, dumb question, moving on. Are you buying that was the look, or does that speak to the lack of the field general, when Darling's off the floor?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the ball was given up a little fast, and they had more time to take another shot. I don't think it's a coincidence that Dylan Darling didn't play the Alabama game. He fouled out with like 5.5 left in Iowa State. He didn't play, and then he barely played Auburn. He was dealing with a hamstring and really couldn't move. Like he gets organized. He gets the ball to the right people. And if you look at that Baylor game, he didn't put up big numbers, but you had Hopkins and Mitchell with big assist totals. And I think part of that is getting the ball in the right spots. And he just right now he's that guy that kind of calms them down and gets them to their stuff. And I don't think it's an overreact. Like they're better team with him on the court. You say what you want about him being a limited defender and not shooting well right now, but they're just really are a much better team with him out there. There's no argument against that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think every single week a consistent theme has been like, well, when Dylan was on the floor, when Darling having to, he kind of seems like he's the one true point guard, and I think that he has proved himself that when healthy, they need him. Coach obviously upset after the game. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what he had to say coming off the Iowa State game.
Well, it was another tough game for us. You play this type of schedule, you're going to be in tough games. The effort was great. The play was terrific. We just, with the game on the line, we just didn't come up with the rebounds necessary to put the other team away. But that's a credit to their incredible crashing of the offensive glass. So we take the loss because we couldn't come up with the rebounds. Unfortunate that we lost another good game.
Well, and I think that goes to your point, Zach. He doesn't look, he did say later, in a soundbite we'll hear later, that the team was devastated. He doesn't look like he's picking, there's no comments on lateral quickness. There's no question of effort. He goes on to say that they gave their full effort, and they're losing to good teams as it is a work in progress. That said, though, they did come out second game, beat a Baylor team with the rebounding problems. Obviously, that's going to continue to be a problem until they fix it. But what did you like about what you saw in the Baylor game?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really good response, to lose a heartbreaker the day before. They came out with energy, had raced out to an 18-4 lead. The ball movement was really good. They made shots. Sometimes it's simple as making shots. Against Auburn, they didn't make shots, and I thought they had a lot of really good looks. I didn't think it was necessarily Auburn doing anything special to, in that second half. They just missed shots. Turnovers were an issue. There's no doubt. There were turnover issues, but yeah, I like the way they responded against Baylor, and I think that game is kind of a template for how they have to play. They have to play with pace. They have to move the ball. And look, they're gonna have to make shots. They made some against Iowa State, made a ton against Baylor, and did it really against Auburn. And I think one thing to keep in mind is if you look at the 4 big games they played, 1 and 3, and those 4 teams are all, to me, significantly better than anyone they're going to play in the Big East outside of UConn. They're all much better than Butler or Georgetown or Seton Hall or Villanova. Like any of these teams, they're all 4 of those teams that they played. So it's really good. It's going to prepare them well for the league, and and now look, they still got a few big ones left. You would hope to get those and salvage the non-conference.
Yeah, undoubtedly. If you somehow go 2-0 or even 1-1 against the SEC, there's a chance to rack up a lot of wins before conference play. And to me, undoubtedly, still St. John's is the second best team right now in the current iteration of the Big East. Coach, very happy with the bounce back. Reminded me a little bit of their bounce back last year in the Bahamas after that 1-point loss to Baylor and another local kid from Long Island Lutheran. Let's go ahead and listen to what Coach had to say.
A class team really, really focuses in, doesn't hang their heads, and brings it, and these guys did. I think for the first 7-8 minutes, we could have given the Knicks a game before losing by 40. So it was a brilliant first 8 minutes of the game, and these 2 guys were both great. I haven't begged very often about players shooting the ball, but I begged these 2 guys to take more shots, and they did tonight. They were both brilliant. Real proud of these guys. It was a good bounce-back game off a devastating loss for us.
Yeah, well, we'll see what the Knicks would have to say about that. But a great bounce-back performance, and I think if you win the next one, everybody's coming home in a much different mood. But unfortunately, then it was time for Auburn. So we are going to take a quick break, and we will break down the Auburn game when we return to Court Storming.
Welcome back to Court Storming with Perry Sook.
Welcome back. We are 2 games into the Vegas slate here on Court Storming, and 2 games, you're feeling pretty good. It's a 1-point loss to a good team where obviously things are correctable in the rebounding, but then the Auburn game happens. You get up by 11 and then end up losing in terrible fashion with a 9-minute meltdown. Coming back to join us again, Zach Braziller from the New York Post. So, Zach, I got to ask you, Auburn, you were there. When did you feel the tide turn? When did you feel that was a bridge too far, that they weren't going to come back again?
Yeah, I thought, they had that 11-point lead. I thought it's a huge, and I felt at the time, a huge play in the game. They're up 9. They get they play a really good defensive possession. They get a bad shot from Auburn, and they don't get the rebound. And immediately, second chance, Auburn then hits it where he gets out. It's a 4-point play. All of a sudden, it's a 5-point game. The next possession, St. John's turns it over. Auburn transition. This is second chance. It's a 3-point game. And then, I remember at that point thinking, this game is now at best. This is going in the lot. This trip was like basically the Bahamas last year. It was this trip. A heart-breaking over against a good team. You come back, now look, I think Baylor won whatever other version was last year, but you come back and you overwhelm your second opponent, but you're feeling good. You go to this early game, which you should win. I think St. John's better than Auburn. Auburn, Pettiford might be the best player on the court, But St. John's, I think, is a better team than Auburn. And, you blew the game, and like, I hate to keep going back to it, but defense rebounding is just is key. Is this key in big spots? I mean, that 4-point play really turned the game. Um,
I think you're allowed to keep going back to it because it keeps being a problem. I mean, it is a consistent theme throughout all of this journey. Even the massive win against Baylor, you aren't rebounding the ball. I mean, second chance points were unbelievable. And it led to that 4-point play that you said, and that is after surviving. Hopkins going 2 for 11, Sellers going 1 for 7, Mitchell going for 2 for 7. You're still in that game with the isolated entity of defensive rebounding, keeping you done. I mean, and it's funny because the final line of rebounds wasn't as gruesome as it looked, but every time it mattered, it seemed like Auburn got another chance. And
Auburn's not they're not a big time rebounding team. Like Baylor is a really athletic, really good offensive rebounding team. Iowa State is a really physical, tough rebounding team. Like Auburn is not that. So like if you losing the rebounding battle, Auburn is much worse, than by 3 is worse than against one of those teams. And yeah, it's it's a problem, and why like you know this point guard stuff and how that's such a big issue. And like I don't think it's. I'm not saying you don't need a good leading guard, you do, but I don't think it's close to the biggest problem. It's defending the ball, staying in front of guys, and it's defensive rebound are the biggest issues. Because look, St. John right now is 7th on offensive efficiency in the country. Your offense is on. Yes, they've gone to some drought late games, and they're clearly better with darling on the court, but they didn't lose the Auburn game because of offense. Yes, the offense they didn't make shots and all of that, but they lost that game because they allowed Auburn to shoot 64% in the second half. They lost Iowa State because they didn't get defensive rebounds down the stretch. And then against the top 10 team, you give them second or third chances in the close game, you're going to lose. And in my opinion, they lost Alabama because they gave them way many second opportunities. Like that, the combination of them not being great defensively so far and not being good defensive rebounding seems to me kind of go hand in hand with what's cost them these games.
I would agree wholeheartedly. If you made a troublesome list, you could start with, I guess, defense is number one, just because continuity. And if you're not letting guys get off shots, then rebounding comes. But then literally 1B would be defensive rebounding. And then maybe like space bar. Then it's, okay, maybe there's a point guard because the offense is still there. The net rankings came out. They're fine, in a normal place to be sitting. But I have a question for you. I want to listen to something Sadiko Imanayo had to say after the game because there is a root cause that I'm a little concerned about, and I'd love to get your take on it right after we listen to these words from Sadiko.
It's not kind of it's just more of like the attention to details that we need to focus on. It's a team culture. Everybody's trying to compare last year's team to this year's team. It's a whole total different team. So I think we just got to figure out why we're good at this team, and they're just trying to figure out how we can win games together with this team.
So this is not the first time that we have heard attention to detail coming from a player as a problem. This is not the first time, when they lost Alabama, Zuby said they had a plan. We just didn't execute what the coach said. Even William and Mary, when they came out and had the slow start and then dominated, Coach literally said, I asked him straight up. I said, hey, what did you tell him at halftime? And he goes, well, I reminded him what the scouting report said. And he said that this is a team that's hard to scout. Is that a problem with this new generation of, hey, we have all of these guys and all of these big name players and they're all coming together? Is that attention to detail? Is that uniquely a St. John's problem with the composition of its roster?
Well, you heard it with, I was at the Champions Classic. You heard a lot of that from Kentucky. And I mean, one thing I think we need to, I'd like to address is I feel like you're hearing way too much of is this team isn't last year's team. Like, last year's team at this point wasn't as good as this year's team. Like, they just weren't. Like, think about it. They lost the double overtime game to a Baylor team that ended up being like a 9 or 10 seed. I forget what they were, but they weren't a top seed. They lost with Georgia. No, they basically a bubble team. They had games against teams like Quinnipiac where they were down at the half. Like, this year's team is further along than last year's team. I hate this notion that last year's team was this great team from November on. Last year's team didn't hit its stride until mid-January. People tend to forget. It's like people forgot what happened in the non-conference. I mean, last year's team, first game of January at home against Butler, you didn't want to lose that game, and it would have been a disastrous loss. People like Perry Richmond wasn't Perry Richmond until mid-January. It's people need to realize it's almost like there's a year about what happened last year. Now last year's team didn't absorb the losses because they didn't play this schedule. They didn't play in Alabama. Even last year's team, game 2 was against a bad Virginia team. This year's team, game 2 in Vegas was against the Baylor, and I think they're going to be pretty good by the end of the year. And they manhandled them. And Auburn is a better team than Georgia was last year. I know maybe this team wasn't as good as the preseason hype being the top 5 team. That's to be determined. But I have no question. To me, I think UConn's clearly the best team in this conference. But I think St. John's clearly number 2. I think the gulf between 2 and 3 is actually bigger than it was. So I think everyone needs to look. Saturday is obviously a huge game. They need to get back to what they do and play a really complete game against Ole Miss. And then you got Iowa, DePaul at home, which we would figure are easy wins. And then you got to take your shot at Kentucky. If they could end up going for these big 6-on conference, they could salvage it, and you're in fine shape and enter the league season. So it's not. All is not lost. It was a bad trip that easily could have been a good trip. They just finished off that Auburn game. So yeah, I think that's kind of where you stand.
No, exactly. There is no secret to the fact that Rick Pitino teams get better as the year goes on. There is too many comparisons to the trip to the Bahamas and the trip to Vegas this year, and the offense didn't look this good this early last year. I think the two things you're butting up against are fan expectations, as you mentioned, because of that, preseason number 5 in the country, which is unfair. I mean, and Rick said he didn't focus on it because you won't know who you are until you play in Alabama. And that being said, they competed with an Alabama. The only time this team has not looked good, at all, is the 9-minute stretch against Auburn. All of that said, how important is this Ole Miss game when it comes to having the support of the fan base, which, plays a lot into crowd advantage, the mental state of the team, who is, as Coach said, just completely, devastated after a loss. And when we look at a big down year for the Big East, getting a couple of these resume builders before you start league play, how important is this a must win? In your mind for St. John's to be back on that, if not 1 or 2 seed, 2 or 3 seed track.
There's some money wins, but it's I kind of look at West Baylor was a very important game, and Baylor was very important because if they lose Baylor, they would have played a non-entity kind of game in game 3. So even though they lost to Auburn, you would rather that loss over Auburn than a Rutgers or a Syracuse with a win. No. At least the loss Auburn helps your strength as well. It helps your metrics. Kind of look will go because they're a very important game. It's a game we don't want to lose. Now I think it's silly to say there's no must wins in November. When you have these good schedules coming up, we're not gonna have Kentucky and Hawkeye which is championships or wins. I don't think you want to call anything under your money, but it's an important game. Look, Ole Miss hasn't played well. They lost to a bad Utah team the other day. They get Miami this week. St. John's is going to have a huge advantage. I think these next 2 weeks are really good for them. They get 9 days off of Ole Miss, another week over Iowa. There's a lot of time to really work on this, and kind of figure out who they are, hammer down the defensive stuff, get better at rebounding. Like they've a lot of time to to be in the end and kind of fine tune some stuff really need to fine tune it.
Yeah, in the same way that the William and Mary week and the Bucknell week were good work on St. John's weeks, having this elongated bye, I think, is great to work on you. And the second biggest thing they need to work on is get a Theragun on the leg of Dylan Darling. We got to get him back in the lineup, in my humble opinion. Last one for you before I let you go. Obviously, a lot of big news coming about Ole Miss this weekend, in the fact that Lane Kiffin is running away to join the LSU Tigers. I am a University of Oklahoma grad, and very much reminds me of when Lincoln Riley up and left in the middle of the night. And even Coach Pitino weighing in on it, saying, hey, if I'm a potential 1 seed and a chance to be a national championship, I'm leaving in March. Something's wrong with this. What are your takes on Rick Pitino weighing in on the college football season?
I mean, it's wild that coach at a school that probably arguably their best season ever. They're good. They were going to get a playoff game. Probably weren't getting a bye. They getting a playoff game, and really their only losses at Georgia to do like, but and look, Kiffin handled poorly as you expect he would. Old Miss should have pushed him out beforehand before the Egg Bowl. But a lot of this is on the system. Where you have the early signing period starting. This is December 3rd. You have the transfer portal opening January 2nd. There are no rules prohibiting schools from talking to other coaches. Like they gotta fix the calendar. If the portal and the early signing period were after the playoff, and schools basically weren't allowed to directly talk to coaches, you wouldn't have these issues. The NFL, you can't talk to coaches in season. You need permission, and the NFL, they don't overrate free agency during the round of the playoffs. And we kind of have the same thing in college basketball. Portal opens during the NCAA tournament. It's like. It's ridiculous. They gotta fix this calendar. Like the talk this past week was Lane Kiffin. It wasn't what's the CEO, who's in the college playoff or not. Big talk during the NCAA tournament was because portal, not like the actual NCAA tournament. Like postseason has to be the number one thing in your sport, and the portal and the coaching carousel like trumps it. It's a major problem, and Lane Kiffin. To me and Orly, obviously, but college, the actual system in place, calendar is the bigger issue.
Agreed wholeheartedly. The schedule is wrong, because if you got to go recruit guys and you got to get your staff set, how are you supposed to prepare for the year where you are and where you're at? But the schedule we do know is set in stone, is the St. John's very rigorous schedule back at Ole Miss at the Garden this Saturday. Zach will be there. I will be there. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing you on Saturday at the Garden.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime.
That will do it for this episode of Court Storming. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week after hopefully a bounce-back win against the Ole Miss Rebels.